I'm joined today by Hailley Griffis, who is the head of communications and content at Buffer and the co-host of the podcast MakeWorkWork. Hailley has great insights on both remote work and marketing and PR that I've been reading both sides for a few years now. In regard to Buffer, if you haven't heard of them, that's a social media management platform. But I'm most interested in their sort of unique, open, forward-thinking, wacky culture. They've already won, Build Remote gives out awards, and they've already won 3 this year for one of the best tech companies to work with, remote companies to work with, and a company with the best benefits. Hailley joins us today to talk about her company, Buffer. And so thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for all of those great awards for Buffer. It's like an honor to be included and recognized in those ways.
Absolutely. So the basic premise here is I want to start off by listing a few things that Buffer does radically different than most companies. It's like you guys have taken the playbook for how to run a standard business and you do everything the opposite. That's what at least it feels like to me.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like that.
I'm sure. So let me just list a few and then sort of I want to ask about them all. So transparent salaries is number one, not just internally. Everyone within the company can see them, but also everybody on the internet can see the salaries as well.
Yes.
Fully remote, 4-day work week, paid sabbaticals, which is sort of a lot, usually from like academia, I'd say, more than businesses. Minimum vacation time. You guys used to have unlimited PTO and you saw some downsides of that and you implemented something called minimum vacation time. You have stipends, maybe monthly, yearly, one time for learning, for co-working, for working at coffee shops, for your home office. You encourage and promote employees to have side projects, which I feel like is definitely unique. Basically, that's just to name a few. So a Buffer goes about against sort of all the standard business practices, and it seems as if you're thriving doing that. Do you know how is that culture built and how is it maintained?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Buffer has been around for I think 13 years now. We're going on 13 years, so it's a very long-term company. It's been being built, and we've been working on the culture and working on the way that we run the company and that we work within the company for a long time. But just in terms of like how do you build and maintain something like this, I think so much of it comes from our CEO, Joel Gascoigne, who is the one who pushed forward making salaries transparent, who, he's one of the people who was most adamant about a 4-day work week. And I think you have to have people who are willing to think differently, who are making decisions or who are thinking about how you work to be able to do that. It's a lot easier if you have leaders in that position doing that than doing it from the ground up. But yeah, I think it's just something that we're constantly working on. Joel has said, well, and we've talked to people about like marching to the beat of our own drum or taking the unbeaten path and like going in our own direction. And I think it's just, if that's the way that you approach business and decisions, if you're like, how can we make this both a successful company, but also a place where people can grow and develop over the years that they are at Buffer, what would that look like? I think that's where you'll start to see some of the things that we've come into. And, I've been at Buffer for 8 years now. My life is radically different from when I started. When I started, Buffer is a fully remote company, fully distributed. I was jumping around, hopping around, working from anywhere that I wanted to, just traveling the world. And 8 years later, I'm married. I have, I have a daughter who's 2.5 years old. My husband, we move for his work. And so I kind of move around with him depending on where he needs to be for work. And it's like all of these things that we've built have still fit me and suited my lifestyle, even as my lifestyle has changed, because we've built something that's more forward thinking. And it's not about a certain kind of person, but it's about a certain way of working, which is very cool. So I think if you keep thinking of it from that perspective, like how can we be successful doing this, really working to the best, like working our best possible setups and also our best possible output, that's how you start to get to some of these things. And it is a constant question in these You listed out all these incredible things that they came through trial and error. They came through constant iteration. They came through ideation and figuring things out. We went with unlimited first before we realized, hey, people aren't taking vacations. This isn't great. We need to do minimum. How much time do we actually want people taking off? Okay, 3 weeks. Let's make sure that everyone is taking at least 3 weeks off in a year, and kind of going from there. So it has taken years to build. Buffer's been around for a long time, plans to be around for a lot longer as well. So these are sort of slow moving things that we've incorporated over time to help us work better.
That's interesting. I feel you mentioned there unlimited PTO and how you implemented that first, and that exactly ended up turning out to be wrong, and you kind of iterate on it and change. There's a lot of those, maybe especially at a remote company. I'm not sure, but mine for that one was Slack. Like everybody's using Slack. Okay, let's go ahead and do Slack. And then we just do Slack, no real plan. And then you go like a year and a half in or something, you're like, I think this is a problem. Do we need some like guidelines on how to use Slack? Should people be on Slack all day? Probably not. Do people need to be expected
Yeah.
to say hello and goodbye? No. So it's like you always attempt something and then the third version is the one that works or something.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's just like if you are constantly looking to improve, and this is something that we value as a company, is like a focus on self-improvement. If you're always looking to improve and looking to make things better, it's not always leaps and bounds. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's just like one step, one day to the next. What can we do better? We also have similarly, we have communications expectations for all teammates of like, here's what to do and here's what not to do. Like the expectation is not that you're in Slack and replying to everything every single day. But the expectation is that you will get back to people by the end of your workday, or that you're on top of this other comms tool that we use called Threads, and like make sure that you're reading that and replying to people within a couple of days there. It's a bit more asynchronous. So you just have to figure that stuff out as you go, and just don't settle where you're at. Keep looking for what are the minor ways we can keep improving and iterating on this.
Right. Let's talk about transparent salaries at Buffer. How was that implemented, or why?
Yeah. So, Buffer's been transparent, and a lot of it, again, was led from our CEO, Joel. Well, all of it initially was led from our CEO, Joel, in the beginning. And he was a part of a couple of different groups where, people were supporting each other while they built startups, or he was following a lot of bloggers while they built companies. And there was sort of this culture of sharing early stages of building companies or of shipping projects that he was involved in. And so Buffer wasn't the first company that he built. And when he did build Buffer, he started sort of sharing. It just felt natural to him to start sharing, like, here are our milestones. We have 5 customers. We have 15 customers. But he just kind of kept going. And, once Buffer started being successful, people were like, oh, this is a little weird that you're still doing this and you're hitting, you're hitting like 1 million ARR and you're still sharing your numbers. This is a little bit strange. And so I know Joel spent some time with the team at the time and reflecting on his own on what are some values that we as Buffer have as a company and we want to bring with us moving forward. And one of them was to default to transparency. So once they settled on, like, this is a value of ours, it's not just something that we were doing for fun at the beginning while we were building Buffer. This is something that we value, we want to do moving forward. The question was, well, what else can we make transparent? And for anyone who has started building a company or started trying to pay people, there's this concept of, like, salaries, they can be really secretive. Salary negotiations can be very secretive. What does everyone make? How do you decide what to pay people? So Joel and the team, they came up with 2 things. One was a salary formula, which I think is important here because there's a reason why we pay people what we pay people that they are aware of. I think that a lot of companies, there is a reason that people are paid what they are, but sometimes it's not maybe a good reason. It's because they asked for more or because they didn't ask for more. And it's not usually known what's going into your salary. How do you know that you are at the top or at the bottom, maybe, of what is, sometimes they'll give you a range of, you could be earning this much within, like, well, why are you where you're at within that range? So anyway, so we published our salary formula. The team, Joel started with sharing the salaries internally first in early 2013. So, this was 10 years ago. At the beginning of the year in 2013, he just shared them publicly, but internally only. So the whole team knew each other's salaries. There was an unveiling of the salary formula. And then by the end of the year, it was like, well, what if we publish this? Like, what if we we put it on the website and we shared it. And it's just going back to that value of what can we make transparent? How can we be more transparent as a business? And salaries was a big one. It was a big point that we felt, okay, we feel better about salaries now that we have a salary formula. We've spent some time thinking about this. Like, here's how we're thinking about it for anyone else who wants to. And I think there's this sense with a lot of the things that we do with transparency that we're hoping to help make others better as well, and to help hold ourselves accountable. Because if we had made a huge mistake in the salary formula, what's great is that someone would have told us. Like, we were, you get comments on the blogs, you get people who reach out on Twitter. We'd had people in the past who would reach out and say, hey, I think you're calculating, like, this was an early blog post. Hey, I think you're calculating MRR wrong. It's like, oh, thanks. That's super helpful to know. This is one of the benefits of transparency. Like, that's excellent. Let's adjust that. Let's get better. Let's improve. And so it kind of ties back into that self-improvement, but it helps hold you accountable. So we had salaries in a Google spreadsheet for the longest time. And then we just, I think 2 years ago now, we built like a specific landing page for salaries. So you can go to buffer.com/salaries and see anyone's salary on the team, sort of filter it and see what about people in different roles, what about people in different countries, etc. So yeah, it's become quite a resource, and it's something I'm very happy that we do.
It's cool. So the company I ran before this, I ran a fully remote marketing agency, which taught me how to build remote companies. And now I work for myself, teaching other people how to run a remote company. At that company, we implemented the Buffer salary calculator and formula, and we tweaked it for what works for us.
Yeah.
We never did fully transparent salaries. We had a public calculator for all the inputs, so anyone could go to it and put in, and they could get the exact salary based on management level, contribution level, location, right? I think it's most of those are taken from a version of your salary calculator, probably from 5 or 6 years ago.
I love that.
But I'm wondering what it's like, since we didn't actually implement transparent salaries. What's it like working at a company with transparent salaries versus one without, for you and people on your team?
Yeah, for me, working at one with transparent salaries, I will say I've been in the uncomfortable situation more than once where you're working somewhere and you find out like everyone else is making more money than me, or like I didn't negotiate well enough earlier in my career. Clearly now anyone who's going for an early job, I'm like, negotiate. And like, you find this stuff out. Employees talk to each other, people talk to each other. It ends up becoming clear. So I've been in that situation more than once. So it was such a relief. Like, it just felt this sense of like, this is something that's not in the back of my mind now while I'm working or while I'm doing things of, am I being paid fairly? Which is a pretty big question. And like, am I being compensated? Should I have asked for more? That's that's to have that spinning around in your head. It takes up a lot of energy. It takes up, a lot of your focus, and it can be kind of negative too if you think you're not being paid fairly. So there's this sense of relief with buffers. Like, I know exactly why I'm getting paid what I'm getting paid. I know what the salary formula is. I feel I'm paid fairly because I understand the formula. I know where, what's going on there. So there's been, for me, this sense of relief, this sense of trust that Buffer has my best interests in heart as well. Because I think if you don't know what the process is, it's hard to know, hey, is the company trying to shortchange people? Like, you don't know. You just don't know whose interests are at the center there. So I feel that. And yeah, I think the only other thing that's different is I feel like I'm a lot more open just generally with salary conversations with friends and family. Of course, they know my salary if they want to.
On the internet.
They can go look, they can find it on the internet. But now we get to have those conversations more openly, which is nice. There's sort of like this barrier that's been left. And I've heard that from other teammates, from people who have joined Buffer. I've heard it's so nice to know that I'm being paid fairly. Like, it's so nice to know that this is based on a formula. A couple of those similar sentiments from the people that I've heard it from. Surprisingly though, I feel like I get asked this a lot. Like, I get asked about like, what's it like to have your salary live on a website? And the only people that ever ask me about my salary are media or like reporters or podcasters. Oh, really? I've actually not had, and I've been at Buffer for 8 years. My salary's been transparent for 8 years. I've never had a friend or family member come up to me and be like, I saw your salary and I know what it is. Like, no one has ever, I'm sure they've looked, but no one has ever said anything to me. So that it's kind of funny in that sense that that, I talk about it a lot more in my job
Yeah.
or like with people at Buffer than I do with people outside of Buffer. I'm sure they've looked, but they haven't said anything still.
Yeah, that's funny. um, I want to ask about the 4-day work week. That's another still sort of radical thing to do, because just everyone works 5 days a week for the last 100 years, almost exactly. So Buffer switched to a 4-day work week in May of 2020. What did you have to change to be able to do that? Removing a work day. I'm assuming you have to change quite a bit about how you operate.
Yeah, I think you do. But again, it's one of those things that it's hard to know going into it what you're going to need to change. And it's something that you sort of have to feel out with time and figure out and sort of make tweaks and adjustments to. Some of the things that we changed were removing meetings, because that's one of the easiest ways to get times back. So I'm not saying we removed all meetings. We still have meetings at
Yep.
Buffer, but we took away maybe any of the optional meetings. We really questioned meetings, like, should this be a weekly one-on-one, or should we be doing monthly one-on-ones or bi-weekly one-on-ones? I think it actually depends on the relationship between the teammate and the manager and where that person is at performance-wise and how much support they need. So we kind of questioned things a lot more instead of just, it's so easy to stick to the status quo with some of these things. So meetings was a big one that we questioned. Just sort of like timelines and deadlines of like, do we need to adjust any of these, or do we need to think about them differently? In the first 6 months of us having a 4-day work week, so from May 2020 when we implemented it, it was, or I guess the first month actually rather, was an experiment where we were trying to figure this out. And at the time we had told everyone, every team, pick your own day off. So like some teams were off on Fridays. My team was off on Wednesdays, which was the best. You work 2 days, you have a day off, and then you work 2 days. You're never working more than 2 days in a row. It's incredible. But a lot of people went for Fridays off. I think a couple people went for Mondays off, which is interesting. And it was actually not great for overlap for an already distributed company where we're working from a lot of time zones to not know like,
Yeah.
oh wait, that team's not online on Mondays. We can't do this call then. But then the other team's not online on Fridays. So for cross collaboration, it was a little bit difficult. So we ended up all taking Fridays off, and that was a lot easier. But I think it's an example of you kind of just have to keep changing stuff iteratively. Yeah. I think meetings, and then just like, how are project deadlines looking? How do we collaborate with each other? Were sort of the biggest things that we questioned, that we keep questioning, to just make sure that, are we being as efficient as possible? Are we making the most of this 4-day work week? And then the goal with the 4-day work week, we still use the Fridays as a like flex time or overflow day if needed. So, I have a 2.5-year-old. Anyone else who has a child in daycare knows that sometimes they're home unexpectedly or you're sick unexpectedly. So sometimes I'll use that Friday if I'm like, whoa, I didn't mean to have my toddler with me 3 days at home this week and I didn't get my best work done. I'm going to like use some time on Friday now that she's back at school to sort of catch up a little bit. So we'll use it as a more of a flexible day. But yeah, then also if you're off for 3 days in a row, the idea is you're more well rested going into the next week. So the idea is that we should all be sort of operating at a higher level because we're getting more rest, so that we can really like focus and sort of do our best work in those 4 days that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned time zones. So we did a 4-day work week in January of 2020. Right before all the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
So we don't have any like increase in productivity, increase in revenue, profit, decrease, because it just like everything went to crap anyway.
March
in
of 2020 just like threw off all your numbers.
Yeah.
Your charts were just like, yeah,
exactly. So it didn't. Basically, the way we interpret what happened implementing the 4-day work week is nothing changed. It was still all good. Everyone could still do this, get the same amount of work done, and people were much happier. Like nothing negatively happened. But there is, I'm glad you mentioned the time zone thing, because if you have multiple days off and then you have a client or another coworker in Australia, that's already a day. You got to like figure out when to talk or whatever. And so you end up going like, oh, we should be doing this now, but we're doing it in 5 days because that's the first opening. So that is hard. You have to pretty hone in on your operations a little bit more. Meetings for us, definitely true. Communication expectations. We talked about Slack. Like people just sitting on Slack being available to other people is a real waste of time. That's another place to find time. And then I know you guys are good at this too, but process so that somebody doesn't have to be there for you to say, hey, what do I do with
Yeah.
this next? You actually have written process down, right? Did you guys work on your process manual or whatever you call it, or tweak it as a result of the 4-day work week, or were you already honed in on that?
We had a lot of information. We've done a lot of like knowledge management building in Notion and like building out our handbook over the last couple of years. So I wouldn't say it was as
Yep.
a result of necessarily the 4-day work week, but maybe there was, you know, looking back, a little bit more pressure to say like, hey, we have to be really on top of this. But as a team that is fully distributed, I
Yep.
think one of the things that we've always been really good at is communicating asynchronously. So
Yeah.
one of my teammates that I work with works in Australia. You know, he's in Australia. I'm in Nashville. Like we just don't have very much overlap. It's like a couple hours in
Yeah.
my evening, a couple hours in his morning, kind of thing.
Right.
If I'm working with him, I just make sure that I'm writing absolutely everything down and sharing everything, and everything is just sort of open. All of our passwords are shared. Like it's just like those little tweaks to make sure that you're working as efficiently as possible, so that when he comes online, if he's blocked from something, but it's like 2 a.m. and I'm definitely asleep, hopefully, then you know that's not the case where he's waiting on me before he can keep working on something that we're working on together. So yeah, I think
Yep.
we do have a handbook. We use Notion for like a lot of this. We try to build things
Hmm.
out, processes. You know, we'll do Loom videos. We'll write things out, just kind of make sure that
Yep.
information is mentioned in multiple places. Like it's sort of like interconnected. It's not only mentioned in one place, but then we'll also just make sure if you're working on stuff that's a bit more like live, that projects have as much information as possible. Multiple people are, you know, able to jump in to help with things. It's not just one person holding all of the information, or necessarily always making all of the decisions. Sometimes we have a couple different people who can move stuff forward.
Yep. So you mentioned asynchronous work and communication, which is again pretty radical, outlier sort of thing in the business world, becoming more popular, but not a lot of companies use it. What's your experience been like working asynchronously, or and how do you figure out what needs to be synchronous versus asynchronous?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm writing a blog post on this right now,
Nice.
but the idea is if it is urgent, timely, or if it's really complicated and it requires a lot of different people, that should be synchronous. That should be done like urgent and timely, maybe like a Slack message. If they don't reply, maybe
Hmm.
like a, you know, text message, or kind of trying to jump on a Zoom together. Complex, sometimes you're looking at like, okay, let's do a couple of different meetings to get everyone in the right room to figure out like what's to really kind of like untie the knot of whatever it is that is complicated that we're working on. And then that urgent thing too, if something is going on and it's impacting a lot of buffer customers, for example, it's like, okay, this has to happen synchronously. Pretty much everything else could be done asynchronously, right? Like
Hmm.
a lot of communication can be done asynchronously. You know, we'll write reports asynchronously. We'll share project updates asynchronously. That doesn't need to be done in a meeting where everyone's sitting there
Hmm.
listening to you talk for, you know, however long, a half hour with updates on stuff. Like they can read it at their own leisure. And then that way it's documented also. So this circles back into like having that strong handbook and being able to collaborate efficiently. But then
Yep.
that's the idea is like, okay, if it's going to be a really long update or an update that's like not urgent that people need to read it immediately, then it can be more of a written thread. We use a tool called Threads for this. And like that can be, we can lean into asynchronous communication there.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm a big proponent of asynchronous work too, but there is no like full asynchronous. It doesn't exist. You need some synchronous stuff. It's like transparency. You can be very transparent. You can't be fully transparent. There are certain things you can't share.
Well, there's the
And it's
privacy, right?
privacy. Yeah.
We tried to do like share feedback. Like if you and I are working together and you had feedback for me and you were like, Hailley, I think this blog post was terrible. You know,
Yeah.
I think it's kinder to do that privately than publicly.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
we tried it. We
That's it.
tried doing it openly
Wow.
and it didn't go it didn't go super well. It kind of
Yeah.
turned into a little bit of a finger pointing. So I agree. And I would say this
Yes.
is the async to
Yep.
sync relationship, I would say, and let me know if you agree, is similar to the like remote and in person. Like you can be remote.
Hmm.
A lot of remote companies and all the best remote companies still get together in person. It's not that they don't believe in
Totally.
working together in person. It's that
Yeah.
they live in different places, but you can still get together, whatever it is, once a year, or if you're a smaller team, it might be easier to do more frequently. But I think it's the same with
Yes.
async and synchronous. Like you can have everything done asynchronously, but it doesn't mean you don't believe in synchronous working, because that can still be very
Right.
useful and powerful.
No, that's very true. I agree with the remote part too, and doing retreats and meetups when you can, and if you have the budget, absolutely, it's a benefit. And the other thing you mentioned is the 4-day work week, which it gives you structure to your week. It doesn't mean you never work on Friday, which is the
Right.
equivalent of a 5-day work week. You would occasionally work on a Sunday or a Saturday, even working the 5-day work week. So there's always nuance to this. I think striving for these things are the right way to run a business, but it's not always 100% this or that.
Yeah, for sure. If you can be, and you, when you're too strict with these things too, and when you're not iterating or improving on them, I think that's maybe when people are like, well, it's not working. Look. And it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
versus, hey, there's a bit of nuance here. There's a gray area, or there's
Yeah.
maybe adjustments that we need to make to work a little bit better here, versus saying like it's not working.
Yeah. Yeah. So we just went through a lot of these. A lot of them come summarize into like time off at Buffer. So I'm wondering, because I do not think the type of work we do, if you do knowledge work or a desk job or whatever you want to call it, time is not one-to-one correlated with results or value or
Mm.
stuff produced. So I'm a big proponent of that. But with paid sabbaticals, right? So I think it's 6 weeks off after 5 years at Buffer. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
It's the program. And then the 4-day work week, which is one way to put that is 52 additional days off than other companies.
Yeah.
Sorry if you don't work at a 4-day work week company for saying that. And then you have minimum time off.
Yeah.
So
And then
do
we
you
also
know how many?
close the whole company for a week at the end of the year. The last week at the end of the
Oh, you
year,
do?
the whole
Okay.
company closes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So about how many days off are people taking a year? Do you have an idea? I mean, I just said 52. That seems to be the baseline.
Well, I think it depends how you're describing time off. So we have,
Mhm.
maybe unsurprisingly, we have a transparent page where
Yep.
you can go and see all of the vacation time that teammates at Buffer are taking. So you can see like
Mhm.
how much time are people taking off on average. So it's buffer.com/time off as one word.
Okay.
So August this year was our biggest month for team taking days off. We have a lot of teammates in Spain. I guess Spain kind of like closes down in August. So I think that's why August ended up being quite a slower, a lot of people on vacation that month. We have a breakdown of the kinds of leave that people take. So about half of it is vacation, but you also have,
Mm-hmm.
so we have a category called holiday, bank, or religious. Because we have teammates in so many different countries,
Mm.
we don't mandate like, hey, you're all off on Thanksgiving. When
Mm-hmm.
when I started working at Buffer, I was in Canada. I was like, well, our Thanksgiving's in October, and you're like,
Yeah.
this week in November doesn't really mean anything to me. So instead, teammates take off the days that are off in their countries. But so all that to say, I don't know if I have like a specific answer
Yeah.
on exactly how much time, but I would say that I think as a company, we're probably taking more time off on average than other companies, especially when you
Yes.
see especially when you think Fridays, the whole company's closed for like the end of the year, and at the end of December, the 4-day work week, of course, and then also encouraging vacation policies and the sabbaticals.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have 2 people out on sabbatical right now. I think we have 2. Yeah. And so, yeah, those
Wow.
definitely adds up. It for sure adds up. I should find a more whole number that includes everything over the year. But here you can see, like on that dashboard, you can kind of see total days per month. So like in August, the whole company, we took off 273 days. That was a big one though. November so far, we have 54 days off. That probably includes time that people have already input into the tool that we use for Thanksgiving, and October was 90 days, so you can kind of see a little sense. But yeah, and we're 80, I think we're 81 people right now, just for context on that number of days.
Okay. Yeah.
And that doesn't include
I'll share a link to that as well. Yeah. Right. I'm curious to know, is there some amount of time off where it gets negative to the work? have you found that, like, is there productivity issues? Are there productivity issues, results, like when you guys are radically taking off that much more time than most people?
I think, I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily that we're taking off so much time that it becomes an issue. I think that it becomes an issue if it's like not planned. So, for
Mm.
example, we have two iOS engineers. One of them is off on sabbatical. The other one is eligible sabbatical for a sabbatical. If they both took a sabbatical at the same time, that would absolutely be detrimental to productivity, right, in our mobile apps. And if something broke on
Yeah.
iOS, what will we even do? So, we are pretty intentional about that. Like sabbaticals aren't just I'm going to decide I take one next month and it starts. So we try and have 6 months notice. We try and plan those things out. We keep in mind family leaves that people have as well, which you can't move. So you can move a
Yeah.
sabbatical around. You can't move when a baby is coming. And
Yeah.
we try to just really plan our vacations as well. We do this at the end of the year as well for coverage, for making sure that
Hmm.
we're getting back to customers within reasonable time. So I don't know. I think that yes, I think that can become negative to productivity if it's unplanned. If it's like, oh hey,
Yeah.
our whole team took like one whole section of the company took time off. We didn't plan this well enough and now we can't move this project forward. Then I could absolutely see it being an issue. But we all
Yeah.
try as managers and leads within the company to just make sure that we're keeping an eye on that and making sure that we have enough people online.
Hmm. Um, so as we start to wrap up, we covered a couple of the sort of unique aspects of the culture at Buffer. Is there anything you think I missed that you'd like to share to other operators of businesses that might be an interesting program to consider?
Um, yeah, I mean, we covered a lot of the really big ones. I think one of the things at Buffer that I like the most and that I think helps me the most as a person, making sure that I'm getting my best work done, is there's a high degree of trust, of ownership, of sort of being in charge of your own work, and that makes a
Mm.
huge difference. So we don't do time tracking, we don't log our hours with anyone. There's no monitoring. Are you online or are you offline right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that creates a very healthy work environment because if you are constantly worried about surveillance, you're maybe not taking breaks, which we know leads to better productivity and like more creative thinking in the future as well. Like a 20-minute walk can do so much for boosting your brain. So maybe you're taking a walk and then you're getting
Yeah.
into this project in the right state of mind. So I think that the way that Buffer approaches work with a lot of trust in employees, but then also with that expectation of like, okay, we're trusting you a lot. We have all of this incredible ways that we work to try and get you to make sure that we're all working to the best of our abilities. It just creates this environment where you have the freedom to like build bigger things or think differently. And I think that is one of the best things. It's really motivating. It is
Hmm.
really fun to talk about, and it is really hard to imagine going somewhere that didn't have that. That was like,
Yes.
no, 10 hours. Like I want to make sure you do this within 10 hours. Or if you get too hyper focused on that level of tracking, then it's hard
Yeah.
to make room for that like more high level thinking or thinking differently or thinking outside of the box. And I think that
Yeah.
we yeah, I think that we've set that up really well. And I struggle when I hear from friends or from people who are like, you know, oh, well, I have to move my mouse once an hour or something like that. It's like, what? Like, I
Oh.
literally don't understand. Like, I can't imagine living and working like that. And so yeah, the trust, the freedom, the being able to work at this higher capacity, it makes a huge difference. It makes for everything feel a lot more fulfilling and motivating. And so that's sort of
Hmm.
one of the ways that we work that I can highly recommend as well.
Yeah. That's great insight. Thank you. How should people follow your work and learn more about Buffer?
Yeah, well, Buffer, we're at Buffer on all the social networks, buffer.com. Check out our blog, which is what my team runs. We put a lot of work into it. And so I think there's a lot of good stuff on there. And
Hmm.
then you can follow along with me. I'm at Hailley Marie on all social networks. And my podcast is MakeWork.work. You can listen to me talk about these things. We talk about systems for doing better work. And we talk about the things that we're trying to do to improve ourselves to the way that we work. And we both have worked remotely and not worked remotely in the past. So those are the things we cover on the show.
I'll share links to all those places wherever you're watching this or listening to this. Hailley, I appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks for the great questions, Henry. This was a lot of fun.